In the early 90s, two good friends started a company called 2B Home Cooked Garments. The look was clean and stylish, the brand was fresh, and the goal was to have fun, all while traveling the globe to various freestyle and BMX events selling t-shirts. Today, Hal Brindley and Steve Buddendeck, 2B, join me to talk about how they met, the influence behind the brand, and how it ended. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Real Influencers Project. I'm your host, Craig Reynolds, and with me today are two of my most favorite people in the galaxy. The originators of 2B Home Cooked Garments, Mr. Hal Brindley and Mr. Steve Buddendeck. How are you gentlemen doing today?
Great.
Doing well.
Yeah. It is
excited
so nice
to see both of you.
I was just about to say, it's so nice to see both of you at the same time. And not via social media or in passing. This is a treat for me, so thank you guys. And while you're both here, I will thank you for the years of friendship, the years of all of the work that you did for me when I was doing Reynolds Racing with the graphics and the shirts and just everything you did was so massively huge for me. And I've never gotten the chance to thank both of you at the same time, so thank you guys for that. That was a very special time in my life, so thank you.
You're welcome. I'd like to thank you for always being such an amazing supporter for us. You know, you were like the epitome of the optimistic and go-getter supporter for our brands, and I want to thank you for that. You did so much for us in return. Well, that was awesome.
I didn't even think of, to me, it was when you guys gave me a t-shirt, right? And to me, I was like, oh, awesome. I got a t-shirt and they gave me a sticker and I'm going to run the sticker because they gave me a t-shirt. And I love the look, the design, the logo, the way that you guys are as individuals. I bought in right away because I thought it was really neat and really cool and fresh. But before we get there, let's take a step back to the time before you guys met because people need to know where you guys came from. So Hal, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Rochester, New York, upstate New York, and suburban kid on the outskirts of Rochester. And where'd you grow up, Steve?
I grew up on the outskirts, further outskirts of Rochester, in Victor or Farmington, New York, which is probably like 15 minutes from where you grew up. I think.
Yep.
Were you guys friends when you were younger as well? Did you know each other at a young age?
High school.
Yeah.
Is when we first met. We were both in high school.
Yeah.
We weren't in the same high school.
No.
Right. See, I thought it was later than that. I didn't realize you guys met that early. I thought it was college or after college.
No, we met through BMX. Really, that's how I met you too. But right. Yeah, just doing bike tricks. That's how we met.
Steve, I want you to recall the story of how we originally met because Steve made this happen. You know, Steve was already making it happen by the time I met him. So what was it? Kinetic? No, it was before Kinetic.
No, it would have probably been Spokes and Wheels, which was a bike shop in Rochester, and we did like tricks in parades, or we did freestyle shows, which if you had Freestyle Magazine or BMX Action, like having a trick team, like BMX Action trick team, or like I know Gork was part of trick team, just like a lot of people throughout BMX history did this. It was popular in the mid to late 80s. So I set up a show for my team at like a Boy Scout jamboree. I don't remember the name of the arena, but it was in Henrietta, New York, and I was in charge of setting it up, and we built a mini ramp on the spot. Or we trucked one in. We were trying to put together
like a whole mini ramp or like a wedge.
No, a mini ramp, like a 7-foot quarter on one side and a 6-foot quarter on the other side, flat bottom. Brought it in a semi truck. It was just like a really big event for us. And
well, you were like 16 or 17, right? 16. Maybe even younger, right?
Yeah. I was 16.
Wow.
So we had support from a local bike shop. So we were doing these shows, and it was skateboarding and BMX. And I was friends with a couple guys from Penfield, and
Kurt Ackerman.
Yeah, Kurt Ackerman and Josh Avery. Yeah, so they were welcome, and Hal, I didn't know Hal, and I was like super stressed out. Then they brought Hal, and I probably the first thing I ever said was not to Hal, but in front of Hal. I was like, "Who brought this guy?" Or "Who's this guy?"
What is he doing here? I think.
What's he doing here? Yeah.
What's he doing here?
Warm welcome. But we got through that. But yeah, we did these freestyle shows around Rochester, and eventually Hal and I started our own freestyle team.
So it was very impressive the way that you guys met. Obviously, how you were completely sold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On that introduction, yeah.
I was pretty new to the BMX world, and I was still starstruck by everything BMX. And Steve was like an organizer at age 16. You know, he was already running events, and so he was like an early influencer on me. Like Steve was like taking care of business already. So when he invited me to be on the trick team, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So so that was kind of how it started. We were trick team buddies, but we quickly became just goofing around buddies.
Yeah.
We realized we had a similar super immature sense of humor, and it just kind of blossomed from there.
Yeah.
So how far or much longer past that did you guys decide, hey, let's do t-shirts? Or how did that thought even come to be?
Kind of co-evolved, like at the same time. So I'm about a year older than you, right, Steve?
Yeah.
So I went off to college in Virginia, and at the same time, Steve started. I'll let you tell your side of the story. I'll tell what was happening on my side. So when I was a freshman, I started making a zine, and it was just like local scene kind of thing. And I wanted to make t-shirts for it. So I just learned how to screen print with a super simple one color, like water-based ink kind of thing. That was Stop Zine. So I was making t-shirts for Stop Zine. And I just started learning how to print shirts. And that's about where I was when Steve approached me about what he was doing, which was.
So I was going to college, community college in Rochester as a graphic design major. And I started a zine because Hal had a zine. And back to like BMX Action freestyling days, that's what people did. They made zines.
Yeah.
And so I started making my zine. And I think my mom she's a seamstress. So she sewed like bridesmaids dresses and alterations and stuff. And I think I had her designing some shorts for our trick team, or like we're trying to like she had sewn some stuff for me. So I decided I was going to start a clothing company with my mom called 2B. So Buddendeck and Buddendeck. And then
this is awesome.
Yeah.
How cool is that? Starting a clothing company with your mom.
Yeah. So she made like the fake pretty much all the stuff I wanted, like Vision Streetwear stuff, skate rags, Motives, which is Bob Harrow's clothing company. Like I wanted that stuff so bad, but my parents were really stingy. So my mom would always say, I can make that. I can sew that. So she did all the sewing. She made me hit packs and like Life's a Beach style shorts and whatnot. Like, let's go to Joanne Fabrics and get some floral prints or get the craziest print possible. So I was like living the poor man's freestyling dream. So Hal was doing his creative project with his zine. I was doing a zine, and then dreamt up this clothing brand. And then I kicked my mom to the curb and replaced her with Hal, because fortunately his last name starts with a B, so it became Brindley Buddendeck.
So Steve had already made this great logo, the 2B logo, 2B Home Cooked Garments. I mean, I think you had already named the whole company before. So it was already called Home Cooked Garments, and we kicked the second Buddendeck out, and I came in as Brindley.
Yeah.
No offense, Mom. Like, you were really the driving force behind 2B. Pat?
Yeah.
And, but yeah, then it kind of got hijacked by me. Yeah. And so Yeah, that's really where it started,
Yep.
with some Vision Streetwear style shorts and a cool logo that Steve came up with. And Steve
Man,
was an
I
awesome
love the
graphic
logo.
designer right from the start, and the whole design ethic of the company was really Steve's baby. I mean, he was an amazing designer all along.
Thanks. It's home cooked. I mean, it continued to be home cooked even once Hal stepped in. So probably became more home cooked. So.
Well,
I mean,
yeah. Speaking of homes, so you guys are in school. At what point did you move in together? And I don't know if it was before Winston-Salem, but at some point you guys decided, if we're going to do this, we need to do this underneath the same roof. How did that come about?
Well, let's see. So once we agreed to do 2B together, that was, I think we were on a snowboarding trip when we first decided to do that. West Virginia, I think, was where it was conceived.
Yeah, we went to Massanutten and then we went to Snowshoe.
Yep. So I was living in Williamsburg, going to school there, while Steve was in school at the community college. And I was, in my sophomore year, I got like a real printing press. I got a flash dryer, started doing plastisol printing, and I thought, I'm going to start doing custom screen printing. So that's when I started my first real business. And I would be up all night printing custom T-shirts for frats and stuff like that, chugging Mountain Dew, and like we just started trying to market our brand. And we did it separately at first. Steve was still in New York, I was in Williamsburg, and we just went with what we knew, which was marketing through zines. Mm-hmm. And so for the first couple of years, we were in two separate places.
Okay.
Right? Probably a couple of years?
Yeah, so I would move to Williamsburg in the summer. So I would go to Monroe Community College during the year. I would work a couple jobs and save up as much money as I could. And then I would, instead of getting a summer job, I would move to Williamsburg and live with Hal, and we would just go to events, go to Woodward where we met you, Craig, go to Rampage, go to just any freestyle event we could go to sell shirts. We would just print up a bunch of shirts and get in Hal's station wagon and drive to an event and sell them and kind of repeat that over and over again.
We basically spread out a sleeping bag and lay out our shirts on it, and that was our shop. We would sell shirts for $10 a piece, and man, we sold a lot of shirts.
We did, yeah.
And we felt so rich when we got back from one of those BMX events, just like piles of 10s and 20s.
Yeah.
It was pretty exciting.
So when we finally met at Woodward, the first time we spoke, I'm not even sure how we started talking or chatting, but it was instant. I know you guys were awesome because you were so much fun and so personable. Were you always
unlike
going to
yourself?
I mean, yeah, I'm kind of
not a very friendly guy. Yeah.
I'm kind of a jerk. Were you always going to races and freestyle, or were you just mainly focusing on some of the freestyle events in the beginning? And did you even see any value in going to races at all? Like, it's a race, forget it. It's a bunch of meatheads.
Well, in Rochester, the Pines were these trails of dirt, whatever. And Whitey Williams was like the local hero. So once I went there to start riding and met Whitey, he was like this BMX racing badass. And actually, I think we probably asked him to introduce us to you, or said, how do we meet Craig? I think in the beginning, he was really helping us network with people we wanted to sponsor.
He was the liaison.
Yeah.
I think we started out mostly focused on freestyle, and Steve kind of pulled us into BMX racing. Because you've done some racing, right?
Yeah. I raced in Rochester, Henrietta.
Yeah. So I was not involved in BMX racing at all. So all the BMX racing influence came from Steve. So like he was the one who networked that whole market and really pushed the racing end of our brand. So that was all Steve's doing. And that's how you guys became such good friends and ended up getting involved with.
Which was, like, again, that was a very, very, very big part of my existence, Reynolds Racing's existence, like the whole shebang was so intertwined with what you guys were doing. And I'm grateful for all of it. Like I still, when I do shirts and I put a little Reynolds Racing sticker in there, they're the original stickers from when you guys used to print them for me. So like I got a ton of them. So when people get those little stickers, I'm like, you guys don't realize like these are the real stickers. This isn't a reprint. It's the real deal. So when did you guys get to Winston-Salem? What was that move all about and run everything out of the house and buy the ramen noodles from across the street?
Yeah.
Did you move to Williamsburg full-time for a year before we left, or were you still
No,
just
you graduated and moved to Richmond because Chris Hargrave was there going to VCU. Right. And then when I graduated from Fredonia State, I went from community college to another New York school. I moved to Richmond after graduation, but you were tired of it by then. So I was only in Richmond for like 3 months.
Right.
And we traveled so much. So as far as how we picked Winston-Salem, I went to South Park for a national, and I met this girl. I was with Mike Hummel and Vaughn Stout, and we went to the mall after like practice was over for the race. And I met this girl named Devin Sprinkle, and she's from Winston-Salem. And of course, after meeting some cute girl, I wanted to go visit Winston-Salem. So Hal and I had a bunch of different places that we wanted, or we were considering living. Like we didn't want to be in Richmond, and we talked about moving to the beach with Lee, maybe Havelock.
Yep.
And I remember we went to Lexington, Kentucky. We went to Charleston, West Virginia.
Charleston, yeah.
Yeah. And I went to Winston-Salem, and it was like there was young people there. And
when he says young people, he means young girls.
Yeah, young girls.
I read between the lines, absolutely.
There was a lot happening. I remember there's like people were cruising, which I think that's a thing in North Carolina, maybe not today, but where people drive their car up and down the street. And like, I remember going there and be like, wow, this is cool. And we were driving to Devin's house, and we found our house that we moved into because it was like a mile down the road from her house. I should say her house, meaning her parents' house.
Yep. So I think the way I remember it was that your pickup truck was already loaded with stuff to move to Havelock. Like we were just going to just drive there and just pick a place and move into it without having any idea what we were doing. And at the last second, we're kind of like, yeah, Winston looks cool. Let's move there.
Yeah.
And I think it was while we were in Havelock, we called the landlord from that house we saw in Winston. Yeah. And she accepted our offer on it. And we were like, okay, let's move to Winston. I mean, it was so random, just like whatever. We really didn't care that much.
I think something that's crazy is there's no internet then. So like all the luxuries we have now to research anything, like anything we did at 2B would be completely different with the internet. So just picking a city on a map, and we drove so much. Hal drove so much because we would be driving from, Richmond to Davenport, Iowa, or to like we'd go to BMX race at Jacksonville, Florida, like on the, moment's notice. I remember looking at a road atlas for hours, like studying, because you're so bored that you didn't have a smartphone, like. Could read a book, but I just looked at the atlas. So we kind of picked cities we might decide to live in based on studying the atlas.
Yeah.
It was so read an atlas today if they had to. Like they would have no clue what they're looking at if you had to find Illinois on this map and tell me how to get there. They'd be clueless.
Yeah.
Absolutely clueless. So you get to Winston-Salem, and is it then that you felt 2B started to pick up a little bit more steam, because you guys started hosting your own events too, right? Your own like skate park contests and things too. Like you were dabbling in a lot of different things.
Yeah, we definitely got more serious about contests when we moved to Winston, I would say. Plus we had a retail shop there. It was kind of like part skate shop, part clothing. We built ramps in the backyard, and But yeah, we were already traveling a lot by that point, and Steve was a event organizer from a young age, so it was pretty natural for us to step into running contests. It was about at the time where big corporate BMX started pulling out of the market, and there was this sort of vacuum for events, and just seemed pretty natural. We started doing events, and so then that became kind of the mainstream of our marketing, I'd say, was doing freestyle events.
One thing I liked about the 2B just feel of it all, and you just hit upon it, I think, and that struck a chord in my mind about how corporate entities were leaving the sport. And it's almost like it goes corporate, grassroots, corporate, grassroots. And it's been a pretty interesting cycle for, at least for racing like that for a while. It felt like 2B was always the grassroots, no matter how successful you guys were. And it kept it very real and very raw and very fun as well. Whenever I'd come see you guys, I'm like, this is so much fun here. Like, it was a blast. And I've got such a strong memory of that feel and that vibe that it's neat to kind of recreate that.
The nice thing about 2B, what made it so real was that it was, we didn't care about business. We didn't get into it to make money, and never really thought about it through the whole course of the business. Like, we never budgeted anything. We never thought about our profit margins. We never thought about it as a business. We really only did it for fun. So that was real. Like, the vibe was actually what the business was about. I mean, the reason it worked was because we loved doing it.
And Steve, were you always making the graphics as well? Were you responsible for all of those, that angle? Or did you guys kind of start to divide some of the tasks?
We both did them. So
Steve was like 90% of the graphics. Like, he really drove the course of the graphics. I occasionally did like a scribble or here and there for a shirt, but no, Steve was the driving force of the graphics for sure. I think, Craig, you and I are still profiting off of Steve's artwork. When I did Old School a few years back, I was still selling some of Steve's designs. You're doing Reynolds Racing shirts, so yeah, we're still.
That's why with the Reynolds Racing shirts, when I'm donating proceeds to Dasco in Ohio, because to me, none of that happens without Steve and without you.
Right. I guess
that's why I'm like
banking off of that.
Yeah, lucrative market.
Well, we're still benefiting from Steve's artistic genius.
Yes, I will. Yes, I'll go with that for sure.
Yeah. Back to your comment about like DIY, like obviously when you name it home cooked, you can't really get that polished. And back to having no internet, like we learned to sew hats and kind of jumpers, like in shorts and pants and stuff. Like, do you remember those orders from Japan? Remember when?
Hell yeah!
We would get
I talk about that a lot now, like trying to explain to my wife how that used to work, because I'm getting into sewing again. Like, here's my machine right next to me.
Yeah.
And so my wife and I are starting a brand from scratch now, and so it's this weird cycle of like back to where I started. And man, I used to spend a lot of time sewing. And so when I was trying to explain to her, when we started making pants, that we went to a furniture upholstery store and bought all the scraps left over from like couch upholstery and curtains and stuff. We came home and made an order of 100 pants for a Japanese order out of upholstery fabric scrap. Yeah. And they were awesome. Like, every one of them was different. Yeah. And they were amazing. And, we were already selling to Motocross International then. She was one of our first international clients.
Ria Akamoto.
Yeah.
Love her. Amazing.
Ria loved them. Yeah. And I think they sold great. So, I mean, man, we spend long hours working on those.
Yeah. In Richmond, I remember we would set a goal and say, okay, at 12 noon, we're going to go outside and we're going to go to 7-Eleven and get something to drink. And then by 12:30, we're going to be back. And it just, all that pent up energy of sewing for like 6 hours straight just to take
For
15
days in a row.
Yeah.
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 Really?
I'll never forget that marathon run of sewing. That was one of my greatest achievements.
That's crazy.
Sewing 100 pair of pants.
Going through all of that, obviously not, like you said, Steve, not having the internet to jump on and YouTube something. What do you guys feel is one of the most important things you've learned while doing 2B?
Go to the library. Back then, is how you would have to learn. Like if you wanted to find out how to manufacture something, you really would have to go to the library. And what do you remember that guide? Is it Thomas.net? It's just like a book.
Yeah, a list of manufacturers.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just U.S. manufacturers. You wouldn't even think about making anything outside the U.S.
No.
So, like, if you want to make a BMX bike grip, you look through the book and be like, okay, there's a company in St. Louis that does this, and then ODI would be in there, but there'd be like maybe 4 choices, and it wouldn't like couldn't research how much it's going to cost. You'd have to call.
Right. Well, how many choices do you have now? Like, if we're going to go make a pair of grips, how many choices are there now? Like in Asia somewhere?
I don't know the answer to that. Really, I don't know, 10. I don't know.
See,
what
yeah,
you do now is you
a
have a
lot,
trading
right?
agent, and you contact the trading agent and say, "Hey, we want to make this," and then they find out who's going to make it.
Yikes.
You've learned so much about manufacturing since those days. It's amazing.
Well, I don't know how we would have learned back then.
Trial and error.
I was going to say trial and error, right?
John Yule started making the pants, right?
Yep.
That was huge because you didn't have to sew the pants anymore.
Yeah, so that was our first foray into finding a manufacturer. John Yell started a sewing shop, and he was making our pants and our shin guards. And that was huge. That was when we felt big time, when somebody was manufacturing products for us. And that freed up more time for us to do what we loved, which was acting stupid and marketing, basically marketing ourselves. Like our brand was really us. Yeah. And we loved just making dumb ads with ourselves in it. That was kind of what we lived for with this business.
That's the most fun part, yeah.
Was being able to give stuff to our friends and people we liked and to just make dumb ads with us in it. That was really what drove us through the whole business.
Showing off.
Yeah. So, like a natural progression from a trick team, which was just showing off in front of people.
Yeah.
This allowed us to explode our showing off skills.
So let's fast forward to how did 2B end? Like, what was the end point of 2B and then the transitioning over into play clothes?
Well, we were in Winston-Salem then, and we got a notification from an attorney in New York saying there was a brand using 2B. It was a hat company. They were making like super cheesy rave beanies or something. Yeah. And they claimed they had first usage that apparently they could prove. So we didn't really want to get into an expensive legal battle over it, mostly because Steve was starting to get involved more in racing and did you start doing magazine editing before this point? I can't really remember the sequence.
We both shot photos and wrote for Brad McDonald when he started Ride. And then to be honest, I really felt the pressure of kind of like making something out of having a degree. Like my parents, like they deal, I paid for like the first semester of college, and as long as I did well, they would keep paying for the next one. So I can remember, do you remember when I worked that odd job for that guy that did like construction work at plazas and stuff?
What were you doing for him?
Like scraping glue off the ground, like ripping carpet off.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. He was, it was like a girl that came in the store. Her dad needed handyman help. And it was like $200 a week cash, and he bought my lunch. And I remember doing it while doing 2B and scraping glue off the floor and thinking, how pissed would my parents be if they knew that they paid for all that college and I'm just scraping glue. So the societal pressures of actually using my degree and getting a job and kind of, giving in to the man. I decided to get a real job. So
what was your first job? I mean, like when we started parting ways, it seems to me like you were doing the NBL magazine, right? Like that was kind of the beginning.
I moved to Columbus to work for the NBL because we were doing the dirt jumping contests, and I knew Bob Tedesco from like our strange relationship with going to the Worlds and going like doing the dirt jumping contests and all that stuff. So he mentioned the job, and then I tried to get the job for a couple months and eventually decided to move to Columbus. And I only worked there for 9 months, but I went and had a normal job. And then Brad McDonald was the first employee of Ride and started Snap BMX magazine. So I just kind of moved on to some other, I don't know if NBL is really DIY, but it was the way I approached it. And then Hal ran a eulogy ad that started Play, basically saying that 2B had died, which a lot of people thought I died. Which
I remember that.
Yeah,
it was a little misleading, maybe. I don't know, but yeah. So a lot of people wondered if Steve had died, but he was basically building Snap from scratch. Like this was like a zine times 100. You know, it was basically him doing everything.
Yeah.
You know,
I worked at the NBL for 9 months, and then I quit and moved back to Winston-Salem and lived with Lee Ramsdale and Hal. Zach Phillips lived there for a little while too.
Yep.
So we had kind of this, it's probably like an early incubator for creatives. Just kidding.
And you started
I was going to say,
too.
just all of the names that you just named, I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool.
It's pretty funny to think that Zach Phillips started out this silly little kid who showed up in Winston-Salem with a sprocket, basically was all he was selling.
Mm-hmm.
That was the beginning of kink. And so we started distributing his sprocket, and he sort of built his brand out of there. Useless Clothes was where Lee started distributing from us, and a few other brands sort of branched out from there. But so when you came back, you started an ad agency as well, right?
Yeah. So Brad wanted me to move to California, and I didn't want to move. So I started a little ad agency and started doing work for DK.
Yeah.
And that's how I ended up in Ohio. Eventually, it was just getting a job offer from DK Bikes and moving to Ohio, and I've been here ever since.
And after you guys broke up 2B and you started Play Clothes, were you doing that by yourself, or was that with anyone else too?
Lee was my primary employee. And at the same time, we were developing Lee's brand Useless.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we were distributing kink. And so Play was as much a distribution company as it was a clothing brand when we started moving in that direction. So Play had a pretty different feel from 2B. 2B came out of the 80s where things were bold and big, and you can see toward the end, 2B got a little more subtle. Like, not saying your shirt is subtle, but compared to like some of the earlier 2B stuff, it started getting a little more subtle, smaller designs, earthy tones, things like that.
Yeah.
So Play fully went in that direction, like a little more subtle, a little more earthy, and kind of more simple. But by that point, I'd had a lot more experience with marketing. We already had name recognition from 2B, so it was super easy to build Play Clothes from that point. And pretty quickly, it became, I guess it was considered the #1 brand at one point by a Ride survey. So it did well pretty fast. And then by that point, with the systems in place, sales got big enough that I started having employees. And after a few years, when I had like 5 employees or something, I was like, this isn't that much fun anymore. This is like a real business.
Really?
Yeah, it started turning into a job. And that's not what I wanted, obviously, because I named it Play because I just wanted to have fun with it like we did in the 2B days. But back then, we had the luxury of not really caring if it made money, because we had super low overhead and we could survive off of nothing. But that sort of changes over time, and so, it's just it got to be not much fun. It wasn't as much play as I wanted it to be, so I sold it after
Really?
about 5 years of doing play. Yeah.
Wow. Who did you sell it to?
I sold it to a guy named Rex who lived in DC. He was a friend of Mike Noonan's. Mike was one of my main employees. And Rex bought it and kind of drove it into the ground within about 6 months. And that was the end of it. So it was sort of the best of both worlds for me because play was really me, you know, and that was probably one of the reasons it didn't really survive selling it. But also he just didn't really like working either, but he did basically no work. So it didn't survive. And so I got some money for it, plus my brand disappeared. So that actually kind of worked out good for me. Sorry, Rex. Sorry about that, Rex. But yeah. So after that, I just wanted to focus on wildlife photography. So that's pretty much what I did.
Excellent. And Steve, you were at DK, and then as a serial entrepreneur, like I think we all are, you started your own bike brand as well.
Yeah, I started Verde Bikes with Corey Muth, and Corey was a 2B rider, and he was also a play employee. And I never, like, Hal and I went on a lot of trips with Corey, but he never talked that much. Like, I can remember driving to like Orlando with Hal and Corey not really saying anything, like reading a stereo magazine the entire time, or never, like, my opinion to Corey was like he was a really great bike rider, and that was it. But then when Hal started to play, he was like, Corey's really smart. He was really like interested in putting systems in place and efficiency, and like I didn't really know that about Corey. And then I hired.
We were all surprised by Corey. He was a mystery man. He was a dark horse coming in. But man, the guy, he was a hard worker, and he was good at figuring out how to do things.
Mm-hmm. He likes to learn, which Hal, you like to learn too. So I think the fact that, I mean, I was business partners with Corey from 2000 to 2017. And I will say that Corey loves to learn, and he loves to do whatever it is he learned at the highest level possible, but unfortunately sometimes once. So like his thirst is quenched. Yeah, like he'll make the raddest website ever, and then he did it. So then he'll want to learn something else. Which that's an unfortunate reality about business is you got to keep doing it every single day, and that's why it becomes work, not play. So
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started Verde Bikes with Corey, and we did that from 2007 until 2017, and then Corey stepped out, and Bill Danishek from DK stepped in. So I'm still doing Verde, but I don't have the pressure of finding workers' comp or product liability insurance, or just kind of all the mundane stuff that's sort of gone away, which is great.
Even better. And Hal, when you started your wildlife photography, is that when you did your world tour as well with the journals?
No, that came later. So when I started doing wildlife photography, I basically just wanted to travel and look for animals and take pictures and goof off. You know, I was kind of goofing off for a while. And in the middle of that, I got married to my first wife, and that didn't work out. And then I started traveling more. You know, during that time, I started surviving by buying and selling houses, by fixing up houses. So I just became, again, by reading books was how I learned how to fix houses. So I do everything. I do electrical, plumbing, carpentry, like every single thing that needs doing in a house. I learned how to do it myself through books. And so I would just start buying crappy houses, live in them for 2 years, fix them up and sell them. And that's how I financed myself through these years of traveling and taking pictures of animals. So that's kind of how I was getting by for a while. Got married, got divorced, and then I was basically at the point where I had just sold a house, had a pocket full of cash, but didn't know where I wanted to live. You know, I was kind of in one of my homeless stages, and I got chatting online. Enter the internet at this point. So I got a random email from a woman in Ireland who said, I saw your website. Oh no, I saw one of your photos in a newspaper in Ireland. It was a leopard attacking a crocodile sequence that was making the rounds in the newspapers at the time. She saw the photo. My name was on the caption or whatever. She found my website. She sent me an email, said, I saw your photo, I like your website, blah, blah, blah. I like what you're doing. So at the time I was single, living in Raleigh with Lee, actually. Or I was renting a little place or whatever. And so I just basically wasn't doing much with my life. And I thought, I wrote her and I said, she said she wanted to go back to Africa. She had done some research work in Africa. She's a zoologist who had studied jackals in Africa. I wanted to go back to do photography. And we said, hey, why don't we meet up in Africa and hang out? So we did, as total strangers. We met in Africa. She's a Spaniard, by the way. She's not Irish. She was living in Ireland, but she's from Spain and is still a Spanish citizen. So we met up in Africa, bought an old truck. Sound familiar, Steve? Steve and I used to buy old trucks, old pickup trucks. So
I had a TV shirt that was an old truck. I remember that, yeah.
So we bought an old pickup truck in Africa.
It's called The Truth, right?
The Truth.
The Truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so we bought an old truck and just drove around Africa for about 8 months or something. And didn't kill each other. Ended up really liking it, even though I was a pretty big asshole going into it, I would say. You know, I was kind of like swinging single, bachelor, jaded kind of person after just coming off a divorce a few years earlier. But we fell in love, and I talked her into moving to the United States. She'd never even been here before and had no desire to ever go to the United States, but she decided to move here, and we got married like 6 months later. But yeah, that's when we did the journal, was when we were traveling in Africa together, and we were both writing separately about our experience and posting it online side by side, but we would never look at what the other one was writing. So that was
brilliant. Brilliant, I tell you,
fun.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
So Steve, you're doing Verde and at System, and how you are now back in North Carolina, in Asheville, and you started another clothing company.
Well, for the interim, in the 10 years we were here, we were just surviving off Airbnb. You know, we bought a crappy old house. We remodeled a unit in the basement. I built a tiny house in the backyard. We moved into there, and so we were renting 2 units on Airbnb. And at the same time, Asheville blew up as a tourist destination. So we totally survived off Airbnb for 6 years. In fact, I'm in the #1 wish-listed unit in North Carolina last year. This was it.
What?
Yeah. So this basement apartment that I made was the #1 wish-listed Airbnb unit in the state. So yeah, we were doing really well. I mean, it was just kind of good luck that Asheville became a crazy tourist destination, but we got in kind of early in Airbnb. We did it for 6 years, and then but we got lazy and bored, and you know, it wasn't a very satisfying life. You know, we were surviving well, but it wasn't satisfying. So when the pandemic hit, we just dumped Airbnb and decided to try something different, and that's how our new clothing brand came about.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so that was April, I guess, we started doing it, and we launched the shop in July. So we've only been open for about 3 months.
How's it going?
Awesome, like shockingly well. And once again, it's fully home cooked. You know, I'm doing so much work myself. In fact, I have my original screen printing press that I got when I was a sophomore in college to do 2B on. This is the actual press. Isn't that insane?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Lee Ramsdell had it in his possession for many years, and he just basically loaned it to me when I said I wanted to start screen printing again. He said, here, take it. You go for it.
So cool.
So it's really gone full circle. So I'm screen printing again. I'm sewing. I'm learning how to embroider, like learning all these things to do myself, and it's really cool and a little bit exhausting because now I'm 50 years old as opposed to 19 when we started this business. So I'm working long hours again, but really enjoying learning things again. Learning a lot. Embroidery's fun. I think I got my first embroidery right here.
Really?
My first embroidered logos. Yeah.
Amazing.
Shout out the name of your company.
Oh, New Plumage. Newplumage.com. Check it out. So yeah, we focus on bird conservation. We do a lot of wildlife conservation kind of education in our website, travelforwildlife.com.
Thank you.
So we decided to focus on sort of wildlife theme for the clothing brand. So New Plumage is all focused around bird conservation and bird themed stuff. So it's going great. I mean, we only do sustainable materials like recycled polyester and organic cottons and recycled cottons and things like that, which is a huge challenge finding good products in that market in the United States because the US doesn't really care that much about sustainable products yet as far as clothing goes. So it's been a huge challenge and a lot to learn, but it's going great. We're definitely getting good support for it.
Excellent.
But learning how to market all over again, like marketing to adults is so different than marketing to kids who don't give a shit and are, reading zines. Now I have to learn how to market on the internet.
Right. I think back to 2B, the attention span of our customer was like 30 days because that's how often the magazines came out. Mm-hmm. So we, no matter how much work we put into something, we got to ride its success for a little while. And now, whether it be Verde or, anything, it just kind of moves up the feed. So no matter how rad a video you make, people has no staying power. It just, oh, that's cool. I like it. Now what do you got? So
right.
I think back to the 2B days, for one, with no internet, it blows my mind. Hal, do you remember we went to Denmark? That was probably 19.
Oh, yeah, I remember Denmark.
91, maybe. Just the idea of finding a flatland contest in Aalborg, Denmark.
On Christmas Day.
Yeah, but just getting an airline ticket to travel across the world was such an endeavor. You needed a travel agent. But how do you find out about the contest? How do you find out what time it starts? How long do we need to be there? All that stuff was so hard. And somehow, I just remember you saying, hey, you want to go to Denmark? And of course, yeah, definitely want to go to Denmark. So it's just hard to think back to how difficult it was without the internet.
And that's part of the reason why I wanted to do this as well. When you look at the Instagrams and all the other influencers that are out there now, for me, it's always been about people like you, my friends, the people that have influenced me, my neighbors, my family. I look at the influencers on the social media feeds, and to me, it's like they're selling you something anyway, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you know, who's really helping you, or they're just getting paid to do it? And I think they're just getting paid to do it. We influence our friends and our people that we love for free. I don't expect anything in return. It's just what we do as people, which is why this has been so special for me to do this. And it was so special to chat with you guys today about your experience and how everything started and how it brought you to where you are today, because all of that was your foundation. You guys were part of my foundation. So I'll profusely thank you guys for all of that. That was my education back in the day. That was massive time for me. So thank you. I'll thank you forever.
Well, we've got a lot to learn from you too, Craig. You've done a lot of great things in the time since 2B, so you have a lot to inspire us with as well.
I would say that everything we've done for Reynolds Racing, it never felt like work. And that's, Hal pointed out why he got tired of play, because it felt like work. And I think that was I think all of us really enjoy the DIY accomplishment. To this day, 30 years later, it's still really, really, really satisfying to learn or to come up with an idea and have it executed. That's a lot of people struggle with, but just hitting the finish line is pretty awesome.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap this up. You guys were awesome. If you guys like what you're saying, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please make sure you subscribe there as well. Hal, Steve, thank you for more than you'll ever know. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk with you guys soon.
Thank you so much, Greg. Good to talk with you both.
Thanks.
See ya.